Remember when pizza night meant dough on the counter and laughter in the kitchen? These forgotten pizza recipes once brought families together before boxes replaced ovens. When did we trade warmth for convenience? Spam and pineapple pizza was the kind of idea that only the 1960s could have dreamed up, born from the post-war fascination with convenience foods and tropical flair. Housewives had pantries lined with tins, and Spam was king. A meat that promised flavor, thrift, and longevity all at once. Pair it with pineapple, the decade's favorite exotic fruit, and you had a dish that felt adventurous without being expensive. The combination was sweet, salty, and oddly satisfying, with each bite tasting like a vacation that never left the kitchen. The canned pineapple added brightness, while the Spam crisped around the edges, giving the illusion of luxury on a working family's budget. Children loved it, guests were intrigued, and soon enough it became a weeknight regular. It wasn't about authenticity or tradition, it was about creativity, born from limitation. In a world powered by advertising and optimism, Spam and pineapple pizza was a triumph of resourcefulness, the kind of comfort that made modern living feel just a little more glamorous. Today it might draw a laugh, but back then it represented possibility, proof that even a tin and a dream could turn into dinner. Biscuit crust pizza pie was the quick-thinking homemaker's answer to the eternal weeknight rush. Yeast was temperamental, dough took time, but biscuit was instant magic: flour, salt, and baking powder in one cheerful yellow box. Housewives in the 1950s and 60s loved it for pancakes and biscuits, but some clever minds turned it into pizza dough. The result was a tender, biscuit-like crust that rose high around bubbling tomato sauce and shredded cheese. It was the kind of meal that came together while helping with homework or folding laundry, a reminder that convenience didn't have to mean compromise. The flavor was mild, buttery, and warm, more pie than pizza, but no one complained. It was perfect for using up whatever you had: sausage one day, vegetables the next. Biscuit crust pizza pie represented the golden age of shortcuts, where home cooks balanced tradition with modern ease. It might not have had the chew of pizzeria crust, but it had something better: heart, time saved, and the taste of a family fed. Hot dog pizza squares were a kid's dream meal come true in the 1970s, where playfulness met practicality in the most American way possible. Parents already had hot dogs in the fridge and ketchup in the pantry, so why not toss them on pizza? The dough was often made from canned biscuit mix or white bread dough, rolled thin and pressed into square pans for easy slicing. Then came the tomato sauce, hot dog rounds, and generous handfuls of shredded cheddar or mozzarella. When baked, it smelled like every backyard birthday party rolled into one. The edges crisped, the cheese bubbled, and the ketchup sweet sauce made it taste familiar yet new. It was quick, cheap, and endlessly adaptable, the kind of meal that could feed a crowd without complaint. For many families, it became a staple of after-school dinners and potlucks, loved not because it was fancy, but because it was fun. Hot dog pizza squares were proof that childhood comfort didn't need a restaurant or a recipe card, just imagination and a pan. Canned mushroom and bologna pizza was the Midwest's answer to culinary scarcity, a masterpiece of making do with what sat on the pantry shelf. Fresh toppings were rare, so cooks leaned on canned mushrooms, pre-sliced bologna, and a spoonful of store-bought sauce. The result might not have been glamorous, but it was hearty, dependable, and deeply nostalgic. The mushrooms added a soft earthiness, while the bologna curled up at the edges into crispy, salty little cups. Families would crowd around aluminum baking sheets, proud of their homemade effort even if it didn't look like the television commercials. It was a working-class meal that fit perfectly into the rhythm of factory towns and tight budgets. Nothing was wasted, and everything was flavored with a sense of practicality that defined the Heartland kitchen. Canned mushroom and bologna pizza was proof that flavor doesn't always come from freshness. It can come from persistence, from opening a can and turning it into something that fed both body and spirit. English muffin mini pizzas were the snack that made every 1970s child feel like a chef. The idea was pure genius: Slice open an English muffin, spoon on a bit of tomato sauce, sprinkle cheese, and add a few pepperoni or olive slices. Pop it under the broiler, and within minutes, you had a crispy, bubbly personal pizza. They were easy, customizable, and most importantly, kid-approved. Parents loved them because they turned after-school chaos into creative fun. No dough rolling, no cleanup, no fuss. Kids loved them because they got to build their own, piling on toppings however they pleased. It was a recipe that didn't come from a cookbook, but from family kitchens and school cafeterias, spreading like wildfire through lunchboxes and birthday parties. English muffin mini pizzas became a rite of passage in the age of toaster ovens and convenience cooking, a symbol of the freedom that modern kitchens promised. They were small, simple, and full of pride, the first taste of independence, hot and melty on a paper plate. Skillet pizza. Supreme was the ultimate weeknight savior, born from broken ovens, crowded counters, and the endless American need to improvise. Cooked entirely on the stovetop, it started with a base of dough pressed into a sizzling cast iron pan, ready to crisp from below while staying soft inside. Sauce, cheese, and toppings piled on top as the lid trapped heat and steam, melting everything together. The result was a bubbling golden masterpiece that didn't require an oven at all. Housewives swore by it during summer heat waves, when turning on the oven felt like stepping into a furnace. The crust browned beautifully, the cheese stretched in long strings, and the aroma filled even the smallest kitchens with comfort. It was pizza made from patience, not precision, proof that good food could survive any inconvenience. Skillet Pizza Supreme turned limitations into innovation, teaching that when tools fail, hands and heart are enough. It wasn't restaurant perfect, but it was perfectly real. Jell-O pizza salad was one of the strangest relics of the 1950s, a bright red experiment that still defies explanation. Imagine tomato-flavored gelatin molded into a ring, topped with grated cheese, sliced olives, and celery bits. It looked like a pizza, but wobbled like dessert, a bizarre reflection of the era's obsession with innovation and spectacle. Housewives were encouraged to turn gelatin into everything from salads to entrees, and this was one of its more adventurous results. Served at church luncheons and neighborhood picnics, it was admired more than it was eaten. The tangy tomato base clashed curiously with the salt of the toppings, creating something equal parts daring and confusing. Yet beneath the oddity was a story of pride and presentation, of homemakers proving that they could make something new from anything at hand. Jell-O pizza salad wasn't really about taste. It was about trying, about pushing boundaries, and feeding creativity in an age of conformity. It remains one of mid-century cooking's most unforgettable curiosities, a shimmering reminder that experimentation has always been part of the American table. Cottage cheese crust pizza was the wholesome child of the 1970s health craze, when every bite came with a side of self-improvement. Diet books and wellness clubs promised satisfaction without guilt, and cottage cheese became a miracle ingredient. Mixed with eggs and oats, it baked into a soft, chewy crust that stood in for bread or dough. Topped with tomato slices and low-fat cheese, it looked like pizza, but claimed to be better for you. It fit perfectly into the era's obsession with moderation, balancing indulgence with intention. The taste was mild and tangy, with a texture somewhere between quiche and cornbread. For those chasing nutrition over nostalgia, it felt modern and responsible, even revolutionary. Cottage cheese crust pizza might seem odd now, but in its time, it represented change, proof that even comfort food could evolve. It was the health-conscious homemaker's rebellion against tradition, baked golden and eaten with pride. Cornmeal crust. Deep dish brought a southern touch to pizza night, turning ordinary dough into something heartier and full of grit. The cornmeal added texture and warmth, giving each slice a rustic crunch that felt closer to cornbread than Italy. It became popular among home cooks who loved blending comfort foods into something new. Topped with tomato sauce, cheddar, and sausage or beans, it was filling enough to feed a family on a small budget. The crust was thick, golden, and sturdy, the kind that soaked up sauce instead of letting it run. Every bite told a story of ingenuity, where Southern kitchens met Northern cravings halfway. It wasn't traditional, but it was proudly American, shaped by what was available and what felt good. Cornmeal crust deep dish was the kind of meal that proved flavor came from experience, not expense. It was country wisdom baked into every bite, a pizza with both backbone and soul. Barbecue baked bean pizza was what happened when cookouts met casseroles in the 1960s, a delicious blend of sweet, smoky, and hearty. Canned baked beans, slathered over pizza dough, took the place of sauce, while cheddar and onion gave it bite. Sometimes a handful of leftover pork or sausage went on top, but it didn't need it. The beans carried the flavor. The result was sticky, rich, and deeply satisfying, the kind of food that drew families to the table fast. It was part barbecue, part pizza, and all nostalgia. The smell of it baking was enough to make neighbors jealous. It was messy to eat, but worth every bite, its sweetness balanced by salt and smoke. Barbecue baked bean pizza was proof that even a few cans and a little imagination could turn supper into something memorable. It wasn't fancy, it was just good, honest food that filled bellies and hearts alike. Hot dish pizza bake was Minnesota's answer to combining two of America's favorite comforts, pizza and casserole, into one bubbling, crowd-pleasing dish. It started with elbow noodles or macaroni layered with ground sausage, tomato sauce, and melted cheese, baked until the edges crisped and the center turned molten. Housewives loved it because it could feed a big family with little effort, stretching a pound of meat into an entire meal. The sauce soaked through the noodles, the cheese browned beautifully, and the sausage gave it just enough flavor to feel hearty. This was the food of potlucks, church suppers, and long winter nights when ovens warmed the whole house. Every scoop was a slice of home, heavy on nostalgia and comfort. Hot dish pizza bake wasn't about finesse, it was about filling plates and hearts alike. The first bite might taste like pizza, but the second reminded you why casseroles ruled the Midwest. It was humble food for hard-working people, born from the belief that dinner should never leave anyone hungry. Even today, it feels like a warm hug in a dish. A little messy, a little improvised, but perfect all the same. Pillsbury Crescent Roll. Pizza Ring was the 1980s at its most triumphant, a time when home entertaining met convenience and magazine recipes promised miracles from a can. Those golden tubes of dough were a household staple, ready to roll into croissants, pigs in blankets, or in this case, a shareable pizza crown. The ring started with triangles of dough arranged in a circle, stuffed with sauce, cheese, and toppings, then folded and baked until flaky. The presentation was everything: golden edges, gooey center, and a pull-apart reveal that always drew applause. It was the perfect party trick for suburban gatherings and potlucks, a way to look impressive without breaking a sweat. Every glossy recipe page from the era sang its praises, showing smiling families around perfect rings of doughy delight. The flavor was buttery, rich, and comforting, a cross between pizza, pastry, and showpiece. Pillsbury Crescent Roll. Pizza Ring was more than a dish. It was a reflection of the optimism and invention of its time. Even now, its charm lives on in every retro cookbook and fond kitchen memory of the decade that made convenience glamorous. Ranch dressing chicken pizza was born before fast food chains caught on, tucked away in the pages of church cookbooks and community recipe swaps. Long before restaurants turned it trendy, homemakers in the 1970s and 80s were spreading ranch dressing instead of tomato sauce and topping it with leftover chicken, scallions, and shredded cheddar. It was creamy, tangy, and perfectly suited for weeknight shortcuts. The ranch replaced heavy sauces, giving the pizza a cool richness that balanced salty toppings. It felt familiar yet fresh, like discovering a new favorite made from what was already in the fridge. People loved it because it was cheap, easy, and crowd-pleasing, especially at potlucks where creativity mattered as much as flavor. Ranch dressing chicken pizza represented a moment in American cooking when experimentation ruled, when innovation was driven by what needed using up, not by trends. Each slice was soft, savory, and filled with Midwestern comfort. What started as a homemaker's improvisation became an entire restaurant genre years later, proving that the best ideas are often born in small-town kitchens, not boardrooms. Taco Pizza Casserole was a masterpiece of Midwestern logic. When two family favorites meet in one pan, why ever separate them again? It began with layers of crushed tortilla chips or soft noodles, ground beef seasoned with taco mix, beans, and melted cheese. Baked until golden and bubbly, it came out looking like lasagna's rebellious cousin. The first bite was smoky, spicy, and comforting, a familiar combination turned playful. Moms loved it because it was cheap and foolproof, a way to feed a crowd of kids and adults alike. It often made appearances at football watch parties, school potlucks, and Friday night dinners when no one could agree on what to eat. A dollop of sour cream on top made it perfect. Taco Pizza Casserole embodied the creativity of the American heartland, where the pantry and imagination worked hand in hand. It was messy, indulgent, and unforgettable, capturing the essence of comfort food that didn't take itself too seriously. Each serving was a reminder that joy in the kitchen comes from blending what you love into something entirely your own. Sardine and onion pizza was a wartime holdover that clung to the frugal kitchens of the early 1950s, when thrift was still a virtue. Canned sardines provided protein when fresh meat was scarce, and onions stretched the flavor with their sweetness. Spread over thin dough with a touch of tomato paste, it baked into something unexpectedly rich. The salty fish melted into the sauce, the onions caramelized, and together they made a meal that felt far more filling than its humble parts. For families recovering from years of rationing, this pizza was survival turned comfort. It wasn't about indulgence, it was about making do, about creating warmth when options were few. The strong aroma filled kitchens, sometimes to the dismay of neighbors, but for those who ate it, it was honest food that remembered hard times. Sardine and onion pizza faded as prosperity returned, replaced by more polished toppings, but its memory lingers as a relic of resourcefulness, a taste of history baked into every crispy edge. Peanut butter pizza was one of the stranger experiments of the 1970s, dreamed up in school cafeterias and children's lunchrooms where curiosity often beat logic. Instead of sauce, a layer of creamy peanut butter spread across the dough, followed by drizzles of honey or jelly and sometimes slices of banana. It was messy, sweet, and sticky, a dessert disguised as dinner. For some kids, it was a revelation. For others, a nightmare. Either way, it captured the era's spirit of fearless invention, when homemakers and cafeteria cooks alike weren't afraid to play with food. It tasted like nostalgia for a simpler time, when recipes didn't have to make sense as long as they made smiles. Peanut butter pizza reflected the creativity that thrived in post-war America, where experimentation was just another form of love. Some topped it with chocolate chips, others baked it plain, but every version told the same story. That joy could come from mixing what you had and hoping for the best. Chef Boyardee boxed. Pizza Kit turned pizza night into a full family event back when the idea of making pizza at home still felt exotic. First sold in the 1950s, the box came with flour mix, tomato sauce, cheese packet, and instructions promising restaurant flavor in your very own kitchen. Parents poured, kneaded, and stirred, while kids waited excitedly for the timer to ring. The smell of that tomato sauce was pure magic, a mix of herbs and hope that filled post-war homes with the thrill of possibility. The dough baked unevenly, the cheese browned fast, but none of that mattered. It was homemade in spirit, if not perfection. Chef Boyardee Boxed Pizza Kit was more than a product. It was an experience that turned supper into an event. Families bonded over mixing and spreading, making memories that lasted longer than the meal. It represented a time when convenience met wonder, and when cooking together still felt like an adventure worth having. Zucchini crust pizza squares were the 1980s early attempt at low-carb innovation, long before cauliflower crusts stole the spotlight. Grated zucchini mixed with egg and cheese formed a soft, chewy base baked until golden. It was part garden harvest, part diet experiment, a favorite among homemakers chasing balance between indulgence and health. Topped with tomato sauce, herbs, and light mozzarella, it delivered the satisfaction of pizza without the guilt. It appeared in fitness magazines, on daytime television, and at neighborhood potlucks where healthy was the new buzzword. Zucchini crust pizza squares captured a moment when American cooking tried to evolve. Less grease, more green. They tasted fresh and homegrown, the kind of food that felt both virtuous and comforting. While the world moved on to newer trends, this recipe stayed a quiet classic for those who believed in moderation over deprivation. Each bite was proof that reinvention didn't require sacrifice, just creativity and care. Egg pizza. Breakfast bake was the kind of dish that appeared on long tables in church basements and farmhouse kitchens, where mornings began early and everyone ate together. It started with a base of biscuit dough or bread cubes, layered with scrambled eggs, cheese, and vegetables, then baked until puffed and golden. The smell filled the room with warmth and welcome. It was easy to make, easy to share, and perfect for feeding a crowd after Sunday service. Some versions added bacon or sausage, others kept it simple and meatless. What mattered most was that it brought people together before the day's work began. The texture was soft and creamy beneath a crisp top, the kind of comfort that lingered long after breakfast ended. Egg pizza. Breakfast bake wasn't fancy. It was fellowship in a pan, a dish that said, "You're home," no matter where you were. Sausage gravy breakfast pizza was born in southern diners of the 1970s, where biscuits and gravy met pizza and never looked back. The crust was buttery and flaky, the sauce replaced by thick, peppery sausage gravy. Scrambled eggs and melted cheese crowned it, turning breakfast into something bold and hearty. It was the kind of meal that fueled farmers, truckers, and factory workers before long days. The gravy soaked into the crust just enough to stay creamy without falling apart, every bite a perfect blend of salt, fat, and satisfaction. When served hot from the oven, it felt like a hug from the kitchen, filling, familiar, and deeply Southern. Sausage gravy breakfast pizza became a quiet classic, spreading from diners to home tables across the country. It was proof that when comfort food meets creativity, the result can be unforgettable. Canned salmon pizza was the pride of coastal kitchens and a clever way to blend seafood with a Midwestern sense of thrift. When fresh fish was too costly or hard to find, canned salmon stepped in as the dependable hero of family suppers. Housewives would mix it with tomato sauce, herbs, and sometimes even a bit of cream cheese, spreading it thick across homemade crusts. The smell was rich and briny, filling the kitchen with a promise of something both practical and indulgent. It was the taste of seaside ingenuity brought inland, where canned goods stretched far and flavor mattered most. The salt of the salmon mingled with the tang of tomato in a way that felt unexpectedly comforting. Children might wrinkle their noses at first, but one bite turned them into believers. For families who couldn't afford steak or roast, this pizza brought something special to the table without wasting a single cent. It was more than dinner. It was a symbol of resilience, of how the sea found its way into landlocked hearts through a simple can. Canned salmon pizza might seem odd today, but in its time, it was nothing short of inspired. Potato crust pizza pie was a dish born from scarcity but remembered for its simplicity. During the Depression, potatoes were abundant when flour was not, and home cooks quickly learned how to make them work. Sliced thin or mashed and pressed into a pie tin, the potatoes baked into a crispy, golden base that held sauce and toppings just like dough. By the 1960s, this idea returned in frugality cookbooks, reminding thrifty homemakers that reinvention never goes out of style. The crust was hearty and flavorful, with a soft inside and browned edges that crunched beneath every bite. It paired beautifully with onions, bits of bacon, or even leftover vegetables from last night's dinner. Potato crust pizza pie was filling, familiar, and flexible, a true comfort during lean years and beyond. It stood as proof that the best recipes didn't always come from plenty, but from persistence. Families across America rediscovered it as both nostalgic and practical, a quiet echo of the Great Depression carried forward through ingenuity. When you bit into it, you could almost taste the generations of cooks who refused to let hunger win. Cold Party Pizza Loaf was one of those dishes that could make any 1960s buffet table sparkle with retro flair. Imagine a loaf of soft white bread, hollowed and layered with pizza fillings, tomato sauce, pepperoni, cheese, and sometimes olives or mushrooms, then chilled until firm. Sliced crosswise, it revealed bright, colorful layers that looked as cheerful as they tasted. It was designed for easy serving, no oven needed, and perfect for picnics or church luncheons where food had to travel well. Housewives loved its make-ahead convenience, while guests admired its novelty. It was a pizza that didn't require heat to make an impression, which made it ideal for summer parties when no one wanted to turn on the stove. The first bite was tangy, creamy, and soft, with just enough salt from the cheese to balance the bread. Cold Party Pizza Loaf might not have been traditional, but it was show-stopping in its own quirky way. It captured the spirit of mid-century America, bright, creative, and endlessly inventive. Even today, it's a forgotten treasure from a time when hospitality meant turning the ordinary into something that made people smile. Spam and egg breakfast pizza was the morning creation that kept military families fueled and fed long before diners made it trendy. Born in the 1950s, it was a smart way to stretch rations and leftovers into a full breakfast that felt homemade. Diced Spam sizzled in the pan until golden, then met scrambled eggs, cheese, and a thin layer of dough or biscuit crust. The mix of salty meat and fluffy eggs baked into something warm and hearty enough to feed a crowd on a shoestring. The smell alone was enough to wake the entire house, smoky, rich, and comforting. It was a recipe that crossed bases and towns, spreading through family cookbooks and military housing communities. No one called it gourmet, but it was good eating that made do with what was on hand. Spam and egg breakfast pizza was about love through practicality, a reminder that creativity thrives even when budgets tighten. Each bite carried both familiarity and ingenuity, turning canned meat and eggs into a sunrise celebration. Macaroni pizza. Casserole was one of those two-in-one miracles that defined community recipe swaps in the 1960s. It began when someone asked, "Why not combine the two dinners everyone loves?" The result was bubbling perfection. Elbow macaroni tossed in pizza sauce, layered with mozzarella, and baked until golden. Ground beef or sausage often made its way in, turning it into a complete meal in one dish. It was family food, built to fill bellies without draining wallets. The noodles absorbed the sauce just enough to taste like pizza in every bite, while the melted cheese tied everything together. It was hearty, comforting, and slightly chaotic in the best way. Homemakers loved it because it was foolproof and flexible. If you had pasta, sauce, and cheese, you had dinner. At church potlucks, it disappeared fast, earning its place as a Midwestern legend. Macaroni pizza casserole was the very definition of ingenuity. Simple ingredients turned extraordinary through warmth and togetherness. Barbecue. Bologna pizza was the flavor of southern back porches, where thrift met smoke and comfort met creativity. Bologna, often called poor man's steak, was sliced thick and fried until the edges curled, then laid over tangy barbecue sauce and melted cheese. The combination was bold, sweet, smoky, and salty all at once. It was food that filled you up and reminded you where you came from. The dough crackled beneath the weight of the sauce while the meat crisped to perfection. Some families brushed the top with more barbecue glaze, making it sticky and irresistible. Barbecue Bologna pizza wasn't fancy. It was familiar, born from a love of big flavor and small budgets. It tasted like summer evenings and laughter around the table, like recipes passed down by word of mouth rather than written down. In every bite was the proof that good food doesn't need good fortune, just imagination, heat, and heart. Sweet apple dessert. Pizza was a homemaker's weeknight secret, a way to turn a dinner favorite into something sweet without starting from scratch. The dough was the same as for dinner pizza, but instead of sauce, it was topped with sliced apples, brown sugar, cinnamon, and a drizzle of melted butter. When baked, it filled the house with a scent so warm and comforting it could chase away any bad day. The apples softened and caramelized, the sugar bubbled into syrup, and the crust turned golden and crisp. It was the dessert that stretched the family budget just a little further, using whatever fruit was still good in the bowl. Sometimes it was served with whipped cream, other times just dusted with sugar. Sweet apple dessert pizza was proof that sweetness didn't need extravagance. It just needed care. It was the taste of resourceful joy, the kind of simple treat that turned supper into celebration. Green pepper and anchovy pizza pie was once a classic topping duo, loved for its salty bite and bold aroma. Anchovies, canned and packed in oil, gave a depth of flavor that balanced perfectly with the bitterness of fresh green peppers. Together, they made a pizza that was both earthy and intense, a combination that demanded attention. In the 1950s and 60s, it was a staple in small Italian-American diners, where menus were short and ingredients humble. Over time, tastes shifted, and anchovies fell from favor, replaced by gentler toppings. But back then, it was a badge of authenticity, a slice that spoke of heritage and simplicity. The smell was unmistakable, the taste unforgettable. Green pepper and anchovy pizza pie reminded diners that food could be fearless, unafraid of contrast or strength. It was old-world tradition baked into modern America, a salty reminder that flavor once mattered more than conformity. Hamburger Helper Pizza Bake was the weeknight wonder of the 1980s, when boxed dinners promised homemade taste in half the time. Ground beef sizzled in a pan, mixed with sauce from the packet, then poured over pasta or dough before being topped with cheese. It was a quick fix that tasted like effort without requiring it. Families loved it because it was cheap, filling, and foolproof. Everything a busy decade demanded. The aroma of bubbling sauce and melted cheese became a hallmark of after-school evenings and TV dinners shared around the table. It wasn't gourmet, but it was dependable, a comfort that defined convenience cooking. Hamburger Helper Pizza Bake was the flavor of the era, processed yet personal, a slice of nostalgia wrapped in foil pans and practicality. For many, it was the first homemade pizza they ever learned to make, proof that even a box could hold a little piece of home. Oatmeal pizza crust was a health food era experiment that proved Americans could never resist reinventing comfort. In the 1970s, as bran, oats, and fiber took over breakfast tables, someone decided pizza should join the revolution. Rolled oats were blended with whole wheat flour, water, and a touch of honey, forming a dense, chewy crust that promised virtue without guilt. It baked up hearty and nutty, more like flatbread than pizza, but still satisfying in its own humble way. Homemakers touted its nutritional benefits, while children eyed it suspiciously, missing the fluffy white crusts of their youth. Still, it found its place among diet clubs, vegetarian cookbooks, and hopeful kitchens chasing balance. Oatmeal pizza crust was more than a recipe. It was a reflection of a changing America, trying to marry health with happiness. Its rough edges and wholesome bite told the story of a nation learning that even its indulgences could wear a halo. Speaking of cost-efficient foods, chili burgers were just as popular in states throughout the 1970s. Maybe it was a phase that really appreciated spice instead of just cheese and salt. Contrarily, though, cheddar cheese was often used in chili burgers, but the difference was in the chili spread. Elevating the flavors of an already mean grilled patty, people would use red chili or green or make sauces out of bell peppers and incorporate different vegetables. Cookouts saw so much love for chili burgers back then that whether or not it was on the menu became an afterthought. Technology leaves things behind. Nowadays, it is much easier to cook better and more complex burgers, so this faded from menus across the states. McDonald's is also something you usually associate with burgers, fries, and a pretty good shake just like Wendy's, but they would also try to rebrand a little with their McSkillet burrito. Originally something they launched in the November of 2007, it was a masterpiece that captivated people immediately and became one of the biggest parts of their sales, giving their breakfast menu just as much success, if not more, than anybody else's. When you think about a McSkillet, you should imagine one of those monster burritos from Chipotle. This was just as famous as those which were pretty much the king of the burrito game. But people would often begin alternating between the McSkillet or outright switching to it. We mean it really went well with some steak and roja sauce as add-ons. It is just that the McSkillet was not particularly a new concept, so when the initial hype died down, it got discontinued in 2013. Even now, there are still many online petitions to bring it back, so who knows? Talking about interesting preparation methods, the White Castle slider from the 1920s had a unique recipe that might have you intrigued. It is no surprise that chefs created creative versions of what we popularly known as burgers, and there is no better example than White Castle sliders. Locals in Wichita, Kansas were introduced to a set of iconic mini burgers made using steamed beef patties with caramelized onions, Roma tomatoes, pickles, lettuce, and cheddar cheese. Calling the sliders peculiar would be correct because people had never consumed any dish like this before. You might be wondering who came up with the idea of mini burgers. Well, a family-owned business opened by Billy Ingram named White Castle introduced sliders onto their menu. They aptly named the little burgers White Castle sliders as they were only found at this diner in Kansas. White Castle Diner advertised the sliders to locals as an easy-to-eat and fulfilling meal sold by the sack that anyone could buy because of how affordable the prices were. Now, the 1920s were not the cheapest decades, but the White Castle slider was sold at a mere 5 cents per piece. This is what you call a steal. Sliders quickly found their place in people's hearts as a favorite food, which urged several restaurants to add similar burgers to their menu. Eventually, the White Castle sliders started a trend of serving mini burgers, which many diners and businesses adopted, making the burger truly iconic. Sizzler made its mark as a beloved destination for steak, seafood, and salad bar aficionados, embodying the casual dining boom of the 1980s and 1990s. Recognizing the importance of variety, Sizzler introduced the concept of a craft salad bar, allowing diners to customize their salads with a wide range of fresh ingredients and toppings. Its pioneering buffet-style salad bar and reasonably priced steak dinners appealed to a broad audience, blending quality with affordability. Over the years, Sizzler adapted its menu and service model in response to changing dietary trends and consumer preferences. However, the ascent of fast casual restaurants and shifting dining expectations contributed to its decline. Despite this, Sizzler's influence persists in the industry, particularly in how buffet and salad bar offerings are perceived and integrated into modern restaurant concepts. If pizza and pineapples made your stomach churn, then get ready for the Aloha Burger. Pineapples nestled between a 12-ounce grilled beef patty, onions, and teriyaki sauce, this burger is tangy and sweet to the max. Buffalo sauce was also a substitute for the teriyaki in some restaurants. People will tell you the flavors balance each other out, and for some folk it really might be a delicious one to order. For most, though, the burger just did not take off very well outside of states like Hawaii. Over there, pineapples as a topping in savory dishes was already an established culinary habit. Not exactly rocket science figuring out why this one could not last on the dinner menus. Think of this as more of a forgotten cult classic with a dedicated niche following. Next up, we have something that you would think people would want to have during a movie or their favorite show, but worked great as breakfast too. Burger King's French toast sticks first came around in 1985 in competition with Wendy's, who was also launching their own stick campaign in hopes of claiming a place in America's Fast Food Hall of Fame. And hey, they did, but the Burger King ones just had something saucy in them, something that gave you a jolt of energy for your regular sucky Monday morning shift or lecture. Some other places did try to make these toast sticks like Jack in the Box and Sonic, and some of those were pretty big players like McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts. They did not have as big of a piece of the pie as Burger King, though. What particularly helped these sticks keep their momentum is how well they paired with other items on the menu, and even some of the others on this list later on. Of course, they were great a la carte as well, but who really goes to fast food joints and walks out without combo meals, especially in those old 90s days? Still, those eras are definitely far behind us now, as the time of the French toast stick is long gone by today. Starting off strong with the classic hamburger. Introduced in the year 1910s, This hamburger would soon become the backbone of our American fast food industry. Classic hamburger can be considered the brainchild of Louis Lasson, who assembled a hamburger during the early 20th century because a customer asked for a quick and delicious meal. He only had ingredients used for steak sandwiches, so he put together a simple bread and broiled ground beef burger in haste. Little did Lasson know, he had just created the first hamburger. By 1910, burgers made out of ground beef and buttered buns turned into a national phenomenon. Hamburgers were truly a local hit in New Haven, where Louis Lunch Eatery had added its creation onto their menus. Other states soon discovered how simple and easy hamburgers were to make, which meant every local diner started adding the dish to their menu. You see, the classic hamburger had a lot going for it because people are enticed by new recipes that are unique. No one had ever thought about how delicious broiled ground beef between toasted bread could be, but now that they had tasted the meal, hamburgers were all they could think about. It is safe to say a classic plain hamburger represents this decade of burgers, as condiments and sauces were yet to be introduced in the recipe. What we found interesting was the burger patty being broiled instead of grilled or fried. To each decade their own. Shakey's Pizza claimed its stake in the American culinary scene by mainstreaming pizza as a fast food staple, intertwining food with fun-filled entertainment. Its innovation was not just in food, but also in atmosphere, as demonstrated when Shakey's introduced the Bunch of Lunch buffet, offering a variety of pizzas, pastas, and other items, making every visit a new experience. The chain's family-friendly vibe, accentuated by live ragtime music and an open kitchen where patrons could watch their pizzas being crafted, was groundbreaking. Shakey's signature thin-crust pizza, enjoyed in a communal setting, distinguished it from its competitors, nurturing a unique social dining experience. However, the brand's decline can be traced back to the rapid expansion of pizza chains with delivery services and a shift in consumer preferences toward thicker crusts and more diverse toppings. Continuing the trend of simple burgers, we have olive burgers, which are just salty olives on top of a ground beef patty with American cheese. Easy to prepare and quick to cook, these got popular around the 1967's Michigan and really paved the way for olives to be used as a topping in burgers. Before this, you would see them, but they were not the main attraction of a hamburger. Olive burgers, coming around with a well-balanced mix of onions, bacon, and the usual flavors Americans remember having with their burgers, really made a point. Definitely a game-changer burger that made its mark in America's history with ground beef and buns, even if it did not stay for too long. Guess you could say olive burgers faded away because as time passed, olives became a regular topping for burgers, and having a separate burger called the olive burger sounded confusing on menus. The McDonald's steak, egg, and cheese bagel came out around the same time as its big breakfast and was often something families ordered together when they ate out. The incredible mix of egg and cheese with really flavorful steak bits into a bagel was something people in the States could not get enough of. It was especially popular with the older crowd, which is funny because the company initially thought it would be more popular with the younger crowd. Back then, you could get this bagel for $1.25, which was a reasonable steal and a perfect add-on at the time. Breakfast menus around the nation had a hard time competing with the steak, egg, and cheese bagel. And despite it being discontinued, it is an 80s icon we really want back. Last on this list is our current decade, which is popularizing build-your-own burger trends. 2020 is all about doing whatever you feel like doing, and that ideology is applied to creating burgers too. Treating burgers like sandwiches, many burger joints started advertising a customizable burger that you can do anything with. Joints allow you to choose from with a variety of buns, meats, cheeses, and toppings to create what you think is the perfect burger. Starkly different from other decades where distinct tastes and flavors each represent a specific time period in history. We are not going to lie, however, the idea of customizing a perfect burger is pretty appealing, considering whichever burger customers end up with, they will love it because you built it yourself. It is a foolproof concept because of this eliminates previous issues. Diners and joints have faced with burgers like catering to vegetarians and adding newer items like bacon or different cheeses to a burger. While it seems like a perfect burger option, one thing we definitely miss from past burgers are the price points. Long gone are the 15-cent grilled onion burgers and the steam burger that you could buy 6 of in just 96 cents. Now a build-it-yourself burger on average costs $12 to $15 because customization is considered a premium perk. So 2020 has provided us with burgers that look seemingly perfect, but they are not the most affordable burgers on this list. Speaking of pizzas, this next one does not just copy an ingredient, it takes the entire pizza into a burger to make the pizza burger. A thick beef patty packed between 2 pizza flatbreads and topped with pepperoni with cheese made for a controversial burger. A lot of parents especially questioned the health risks such a fatty burger might have, and they were right to. Not as much as the Aloha burger, but it definitely raised some eyebrows and some revenue alike, though that was more so for experimental fusion food joints. Taste-wise, this was not too bad though. It was extremely heavy and greasy. America would slowly gravitate towards less fatty foods and more healthier ones, so you can guess why people dropped this off their orders. Restaurants did the same with their menus around the 80s, because you cannot calorie count and have pizza burgers. McDonald's is a name anyone can recognize and still holds up today just as much as before, but do you remember when they were serving the iconic Big Breakfast at stores? McDonald's best and most iconic starter was probably their Big Breakfast, which literally everybody can remember having. This dish was truly a star on the 70s and 80s menus way before anybody ever even thought of a McMuffin. Mostly popular amongst teenagers working part-time, and McDonald's staff would enjoy a big breakfast on early work days. It was not just them, trust us. 8-year-olds to 35-year-olds all enjoyed getting soft, delicious scrambled eggs served with the fluffiest muffins you could get under $1. Sounds like a pretty good deal, right? No wonder it performed as well as it did, even if it got discontinued in 2002 in favor of hot dogs and burgers. A&W drive-in restaurants revolutionized the fast food scene with their groundbreaking drive-in format, allowing patrons to dine directly from their automobiles. This innovation, paired with the debut of their iconic root beer float served in frosty mugs, quickly endeared A&W to the American public. Their signature in-house brewed root beer, known for its creamy and frothy texture, set A&W apart, embedding it as a staple of American culture. This pioneering spirit spurred the expansion of drive-in and fast food establishments across the country. Despite facing challenges from evolving consumer demands for healthier dining options and more indoor seating, along with adapting operational strategies, A&W is actively reinventing itself. By updating its brand and expanding its menu to align with modern preferences, A&W aims to reinvigorate its historical charm and relevance in today's fast food landscape. If the Aloha burger at the start was too much of a shock for you, then the Hawaiian burger may actually make you cringe. Ham and pineapple on a beef patty with teriyaki sauce of all sauces. To be frank, the flavors were way too much for most people when it initially came out in the recent decades. However, when people did give it a shot, some developed a taste for it. And as a result, it became a niche classic at some joints. Mostly Hawaiian burger places that stuck to the theme pretty hard. What you would get was pretty authentic, and the taste was not the greatest, but not an abomination either. Still, a burger this bold would have a difficult time being a bestseller. Eventually, the Hawaiian burger was replaced on menus with newer burgers that were not too experimental. McDonald's tried to break into some very unfamiliar territory with the McPizza, which did better than you would think and poorer than they had hoped. It definitely did have a strong fan base, but it just did not have enough of one, as pizzas were not exactly the brand's specialty. Still, the McPizza was a good choice to go for when you wanted an affordable and neat pizza, but did not want to commit to a whole proper pie from your favorite downtown joint. Also, people associated McDonald's with fast service, and the pizza usually took 15-20 minutes, and nobody had that kind of time for their drive-through orders, so they let go of the item in 1991. Wetson's Burgers, with its distinctive offerings and strategic positioning, made a mark in the competitive New York area fast food scene. Its initiative to offer value meals, including a burger, fries, and a drink at a competitive price,
was a precursor to the value menu concept widely adopted in the industry today. Known for its signature Big W burger and catchy slogan, "Give a hamburger a break," Wetsons aimed to challenge larger chains with a focus on quality and affordability. However, Wetsons encountered difficulty in maintaining its position against national competitors, leading to its decline. The story of Wetsons highlights the challenges of standing out in a crowded market and the importance of continuous innovation and brand differentiation.
Something that went bar for bar with the French toast sticks were the Cinni Minis from Burger King, which were a delight you could not miss out on. Ever found yourself having a sudden sweet tooth or craving you cannot control for some cinnamon goodness? Cinni Minis were the cure for all your ailments, and they came cheaper than some ibuprofen or a Panadol. All the same, any headache you had after a bitter day would wash away with each delicious bite. Often, people would pair the French toast sticks with these too because they made such an elite dessert breakfast combo. Despite introducing it in the late 90s, its success was good enough for them to keep it in circulation until 2016, and the 2000s to 2010s were a volatile time for food in America. The market was constantly changing, and the Cinni Minis eventually lost their spark. Similarly, ranch burgers became popular because it took an ingredient that was a staple of burgers already in like half the nation and made it the main selling point. Ranch burgers were typically a favorite among families in the 50s and 70s who wanted to take a break from the typical ham or cheeseburger. When your kids keep asking for something new and you do not know what to do, ranch dressing can be a cheap and convenient savior. This led to ranch burgers becoming a mainstay on family menus in many parts of the nation. Restaurants eventually started noticing that, and they began coming out with their own ranch burgers, so it shifted from homemade comfort food to takeout too. While the ranch burger had a great run, it is not exciting enough to be on most menus today because people are very used to ranch now. Speaking of eggs, the Burger King enormous omelet sandwich came out around 2005 and rocked breakfast menus just as much as a good McDonald's bagel. A behemoth in both size and calories, this drew so much attention on social media and fans went in droves excited to try out the new mouth-watering monstrosity. For about $3.29, you could have yourself a full-course breakfast meal, and if you do not trust us, then no worries. The numbers speak for themselves, and Burger King saw a 20% hike in breakfast sales that left the bigwigs speechless. We guess you can never really go wrong with eggs and bread, which may just be the food equivalent of man's best friend.
Sambo's rapid expansion and controversial branding were pivotal in its complex history within the fast food realm. The chain initially found success with a strategy that included offering breakfast all day, a novelty at the time that attracted a wide demographic. However, its name, derived from a 19th century children's book, became a point of contention due to racial connotations, overshadowing its early achievements. Efforts to mitigate the backlash, such as renaming some locations, were insufficient to reverse the damage to the brand's image. Beyond the controversy, Sambo's faced challenges from increasing competition and shifts in consumer dining preferences. The narrative of Sambo's underscores the significance of brand identity and the impact of cultural sensitivity on a business's success.
Love for mushrooms was growing, creating room in the market for a Swiss mushroom burger. Burgers that had mushrooms so far would have them as a topping, but they would just be diced or slightly fried, so there was a hunger for an authentic mushroom burger. Swiss mushroom burgers worked so well because the mushrooms were very particularly sautéed, and Swiss cheese was specifically picked to complement the mushrooms in most places. Recipes that were common in the American burger scene often stressed on how both of those really needed to work together. As a result, burger fanatics all over the States went insane over this one. Nowadays, again, while it was great for its time, recipes like this have become too commonplace to be very popular on menus presently. Sometimes simple really does the trick, and with the Southern-style chicken biscuit that McDonald's put on their breakfast menu, they proved that old golden rule of thumb true to the core. Just a piece of slightly dry oregano-flavored chicken between two halves of a biscuit, this was a very popular add-on and basically a guaranteed order if you were getting hash browns or a whole combo meal from the breakfast menu. It was hard to hate on it because at the time it filled a niche that no one in the market was really taking up, which was a slightly more tame chicken biscuit, not a very spicy one. Plus, that commercial was pretty catchy when it used to air the time, and if McDonald's does anything right, it is the marketing. The Southern-style chicken biscuit got discontinued a while later as it fell out of popularity due to inflation. People did not see the point in paying that much for it, and we could not blame them.
Po Folks offered an authentic Southern dining experience, distinguished by its traditional Southern cooking and warm hospitality. Selected locations featured live music and themed decor, further immersing guests in a Southern home-like ambiance. The restaurant's cozy, country-inspired atmosphere paired with a comforting menu featuring classics like fried chicken, catfish, and biscuits resonated with those seeking genuine Southern comfort food. However, Po Folks struggled with market shifts, including a trend towards healthier eating and the rise of fast casual competitors, leading to its decline. This case underlines the obstacles faced by traditional eateries in maintaining relevance in an evolving food industry, underscoring the need for continual innovation and adaptability.
A mini skillet bowl sounds healthy enough, right? That was not the only fast food name that would take a step in a more greener direction, as McDonald's came out with their fruit and yogurt parfait sometime after their big breakfast, initially being a sweet cup you could get for just $1. It was also a wonderful breakfast if you were trying for a healthier lifestyle or were one of those early morning run people. Maybe you had the gym in the afternoon and were keener on lighter breakfasts, or maybe you just want to get your fruit game up. Either way, the parfait sold in waves and made sales go high for an item that was irregular from the rest of the menu. Unfortunately, it was something they discontinued during the pandemic to make service quicker for workers because everyone prioritized minimizing contact back then. Guacamole burgers took something that American burgers already had and cranked it up to an 11. Guacamole has been such a long-time obsession in American burger culture that it is hard to remember a period when it wasn't included. Maybe when burgers were first introduced and only ham and cheese were used. Guacamole burgers can often be found being served alongside spicy fries with avocados and jalapenos. People usually would not pair bacon with this, though some would obviously. Rather, they would kick it up even more with bell peppers. Fried onion rings also made for such a great crispy factor that completed the burger. All in all, it is definitely a burger that a more spice-oriented burger lover would go for. Guacamole as a very prominent topping is not something America is currently too fond of, so this burger has been largely forgotten and taken off of menus.
Steak and Ale introduced a novel dining concept by merging the affordability of a steak menu with the casual, relaxed atmosphere of a tavern, pioneering a new category in the dining scene. Its introduction of the salad bar as a complimentary addition to any entree was a game changer, offering diners variety and a sense of personalization. Signature dishes like the herb-roasted prime rib and Kensington Club steak, set against a backdrop of warm, dark wood decor, distinguished Steak and Ale from its peers. This concept laid the groundwork for future casual dining establishments by offering an upscale dining experience at more accessible prices. The downfall of Steak and Ale was brought about by intense competition and economic downturns, but its influence lingers in the casual dining sector, with many restaurants incorporating elements of its model to create a welcoming dining environment.
Cajun burgers gave more steam to the trend of easy-to-make burgers that could be made at home. Ground beef patties that were fried and topped with Cajun seasoning were the best parts of eating a Cajun burger. Louisiana often had many corners that would feature Cajun cuisine, and they would have this as a reasonable but full meal. Down any alley or on any street at a Cajun food stall, people would often gather around to eat what was a delicious but affordable dish. However, nowadays, there has been a decline in the use of Cajun overall in sandwiches. Restaurants and joints that would be known for a good Cajun burger are largely a thing of the past as of today. Sonic kind of stood out from the rest of the crowd with their take on a burrito-based breakfast. Their breakfast burrito had plenty of sausage, tots, cheese, and some bacon to top it off. It was pretty beloved, even though Sonic did not have the same pull as some of the biggest names in the fast food industry. Now, do not get us wrong, they were popular and a good local breakfast option, but their popularity was not as widespread as, let's say, McDonald's. As time passed, newer chains like Chipotle introduced their breakfast burritos that gained more traction than Sonic could generate. This meant a downfall in popularity for a breakfast burrito that once was loved by every person that visited Sonic. This led to the burrito being discontinued sometime at the start of the 2000s. If these forgotten pizzas made you hungry for nostalgia, comment your favorite and subscribe for another taste of history.